Hi, everybody, and oh, well, wait, David, you done shifting there? You good?
This going live stuff is really hard. This
Wait,
Yeah.
humanity
are
and
you a DJ, David? What are you doing over there, shuffling around?
Scratching and mixing.
Oh my
Whoa, whoa,
God!
whoa, whoa.
All right, ready?
All right.
Here we
We're
go.
good.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Spiritual Activist. I am so excited today. I've got an extraordinary panel, and I'm going to walk you through our panel today, and then we're going to discuss today's topic. Today is actually going to be a wild card episode, so we're going to be shifting from our normal format a little bit to get down to the nitty-gritty on this topic. It's a great topic. So first of all, welcome Amy Alcini from Recycling Happiness. How are you today?
Thank you. Glad to be with you guys.
Glad to be with you as well. We've got David Pagan from Kick-Ass Dad. How are you, David?
I'm awesome, man.
Excellent. Jay 40 from the Greatness Zone. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, panel. Great to be here.
Yes, and my name is Michael Mataluni from Kick-Ass Dad. Thrilled to launch The Spiritual Activist here to get down to some of these issues, and I look forward to hearing from each of you. So today's topic it's a big one. It's something that I think is misunderstood in many, many ways. People have a hard time compartmentalizing these things in their mind and figuring out, okay, what's the real deal? So today's topic is religion versus spirituality. What does it mean? What does it mean to each of us? And then we're going to have a lively discussion about it. So, Amy, first of all, let me start with you. I'm going to give you about 2 to 3 minutes to kind of tell me what your experience of spirituality is and how it contrasts from religion for you.
Well, I think to start in the context, it's a really big discussion. I mean, we saw it actually play out this week in the Supreme Court rulings. There's a lot of social messaging and outcry of having religion be maybe interjected into our lives, what that means for our country, what kind of values do we hold. It's a very interesting topic, and I see that it gets a ton of interest. Whenever someone puts spirituality and religion together, or just religion and state, whatever you want to talk about in terms of religion, there's always some kind of really important, I think, discussion that follows. And for me, I feel like religion is something that has been pre-made. It's a kind of a pre-made formula, not necessarily good or bad. It's a set of beliefs that have been written or shared, and we can decide to use them. And in a lot of cases, like the Dalai Lama says that for each person on the planet, he would hope that there would be a religion for them. So for 7 billion people, he would like 7 billion religions. So for me, that says that he likes people to follow a path, that there is really a lot of merit in following a spiritual path. And we call that a lot of times in the secular world, or in the world that we live in, religion. So what I distinguish between religion and spirituality is, for me, spirituality is kind of a amalgam that I feel called to me, plus my own inner feeling or what drives me. So it's an integration of a lot of different, say, religions, but also primarily following that which speaks the most softly inside of me.
So kind of to recap there, Amy, that's a really interesting perspective on it. So what I'm hearing you saying is that the idea behind spirituality is that it's intimate to every person, yet we have created these religions that are kind of a broadcast set of beliefs that people find themselves having to adhere to this one or that one, as opposed to simply following whatever that is, and then integrating it with their heart and then saying, okay, does this make sense to me? David, what is your perspective on religion versus spirituality?
To me, it's more about it's more language than anything else, right? To describe either the same thing, or, like the way Amy put it, a path that you choose, right? It's no different than, because it's like what you're born with, and it's part of your environment, no different than your language is, right? So we learn that, in English, this is a cup, an awesome cup, by the way. It's a giant cup. But you know, that's a cup. In another language, if you were from somewhere else, it would be the same thing. It would just be called something different, right? And you might even have I know, especially in the Latin culture, we have a lot of different dialects. So we'll even argue about, you know, the correct way to say car. You know, is it carro? Is it coche? You know, and there's an argument, and one feels that the other is better than this other one. But it gives, and it really kind of, for me, kind of came to the head yesterday when we went to volunteer at New Image Family Center in downtown, where there was an evangelist there speaking in front of this group of teenagers, right? Young teenagers, very influential. And a lot of the things that she was saying, and Jay, this will excite you. I mean, it was the same line of what the Greatness Zone teaches, right? About yourself, about these inherent talents, about this inherent love that you have. But she put it in terms that they could describe, you know, or not that they could describe, but rather that they could relate to, and so they could understand, you know. So for me, you know, religion versus spirituality, it's you know, there's a heart inside of a box, and depending on where you're at, you know, the spirituality is that heart inside the box, and the box is, you know, depending on where you bought that, you know, where you got that gift at. You know, it could be wrapped in a Tiffany's box, it could be wrapped in, you know, a Target box, it could just be wrapped in newspaper because you got it from home. So to me, that's what religion kind of denotes to me. You know, it's just this packaging, and inside is this heart, this spirituality, you know, to connect you with source. And you know, so sometimes, just like religion, sometimes you got to tear that crap off to see what's really inside.
That was beautifully described, David.
Really beautiful.
Yeah, and so it's this idea that because I'm looking at something from one direction and you're looking at something from another direction, doesn't make it a different thing, yet it has a different name. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, David. Jay, our middle ground man, what is your perspective? What is your perspective on this? Because you have this unique greatness perspective, and it really, and I've watched you evolve it over time and start to get back into more of the spirituality. I know that's been hard for you in your work because you're very much a pragmatist. And so how are you kind of thinking about this whole religion versus spirituality conversation?
I think they're designed to be similar, and maybe just taking off what Amy and David said already too, but the intention was that religion, organized structure, creating a space, setting up some rules so you could be spiritual, might be its intention. I just don't think that's how it worked out. So to me, the spirituality is the internal journey to figure yourself out, to discover your gifts, and then to choose how you should show up and deliver them. That's what I think spirituality is. So I think spirituality is my own intentional journey, but it forces me to look inward. So a spiritual, for me, spirituality is, I think, exactly that, my internal personal journey to discover what my sense of being is, and then how to deliver my being or manifest my being in my world. I quite honestly think that the intention in religion was that it created a housing so that that process of spirituality could happen. So maybe its intention was there. When I look at it now, I don't think that's at all what's going on. So normally I am the middle ground guy, but here's one where I'm not a big fan of religion because I think it creates a club of who believes what I believe instead of here's a mechanism and some space for you to create your own GPS to show up big to your life, whatever that might be. And so I think I'm trying to give it credit, and I have a little rough going with religion. You know, when you're a gay person, you know, you almost take sides here because there's religions that say it's okay or not okay for you to be something that you are. So here's the rub. If this is supposed to be about a spiritual journey to be your most authentic self, how can the casing that says it's okay for you to do this tell you what you could and what you can and can't be, when its only purpose is to say be who you're supposed to be? So there's my rub. And so I think they're very different now. I think they were intended to be similar. but I think they have turned themselves into two different camps, and they use words interchangeably, and I don't think they are.
That's interesting you say that, and I'd like to bring up a point that Dave made yesterday when we were down volunteering and we were listening to the evangelist speak, who was absolutely amazing, and she moved me. Like, she was coming from a very Christian perspective, like, this is the path, it's through Jesus Christ. These are the things that you have to do in order to be saved, and she used a lot of that terminology. And that terminology turns me off, the idea of being saved, because I feel like it does create this kind of group mentality, where, okay, we're saved and you're not. And I think that's an issue. And for me, I think it's just it's the wording. And I think that a lot of times we're speaking the same language. Like, from what she was saying, I think we were speaking the same language, but we were just using different words. So where she would say saved, I would say surrender, right? She would say you have to be saved by your higher power. I would say you need to surrender to your higher power, and that actually allows you to begin to interpret your own spirituality in a way that brings the best out of you, that helps you make decisions that are based on your belief structures that cause you to be the greatest version of the grandest vision of who you choose to be in your life. And I think that religion can often be used to stifle, when in reality there is that core, and just like we were talking about earlier, that box surrounding it. Okay, if we begin to tear away the layers, what are we starting to find? And how are we starting to find it? So, Jay, I just want to shoot you back a little bit. So what is your experience now, having been through, what you've been through, and realizing that the religions that are the closest to you are the furthest away from understanding you and respecting your journey? How do you begin to reconcile that in your own mind?
Well, to me, it reminds me that your spiritual journey is a personal one anyway. I mean, the reason why you choose a religion is because it should accelerate your ability to discover who you are and live in your greatest way. And if it doesn't serve you, so great coaching question, right? How does this serve you? If your religion doesn't serve you, doesn't make you, doesn't guide you, encourage you, inspire you, engage you, empower you to be who you are supposed to be, then I don't think it deserves your attention. I don't think it deserves your following. And maybe the difference that, Amy was talking about, your minister or charismatic friend there was saying, be saved, you call it surrender, I call it acceptance, that the self-acceptance happens in your journey, and everything around you should guide you to choose yourself versus not choose yourself. And if something doesn't let you choose you for who you are, I don't think it serves you, and therefore I don't think you should follow it.
That's a great point. Amy, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I love this discussion. I mean, listening to Jay and David too talk about this, like the container that holds our heart, or that it's all these different. I think it's a great analogy about the different cups. We have a different name for the word cup. It is a lot about semantics, religion. And I don't know if you guys saw, recently there was a post going around Facebook I just thought was really perfect. It was a picture of a globe, and it was a picture of these two Martians in a ship looking down on the globe. And there was all this like dust and fire and exclamation points and squiggles coming off the globe. And the one Martian looks at the other and says, as far as I can tell, they're fighting over which religion is the most peaceful. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just loved it. I saw it like 2 or 3 times, but it's like, if we picture ourselves in a spaceship looking down on us, we are one place. I mean, we are all in this ship together. And the fact that we would use religion to divide us is mind-boggling to me. Right. One of my favorite sayings is that people are down on atheists, but an atheist has never started a war. They haven't been the product of starting a war, because they are not pushing their beliefs on someone else. So I think just stepping back, stepping outside our globe and considering it from a different point of view, I think all these other possibilities come to mind. And I love what Jay talks about, that if it's something that's going to help you move on your path, that what the world needs you to do what you love to do. If it's going to foster that, then let's embrace it, and let's embrace someone else's who's doing that for them.
That's a great point. And I love that idea that, the world is one, yet we treat each other as if we're these completely distinct people, even though, even our genetics is 99.9% similar from one individual to the next. We're just little individuations of that structure. So, but I have to challenge you on this idea that atheists have never started a war. I mean, you look at communism, you look at these folks, Mao of ancient China, you look at Hitler. I mean, these guys weren't starting wars over religion necessarily. They were atheists, and they were trying to strike down religion for their own ideals. What do you say to that?
Well, I would not disagree that people who may not be religious have started wars. I guess what I'm saying is that most of the wars that have, killed the most amount of people have been started over a religious conflict. And it's just the irony of that statement, a war started over religion. That's such a conflicting statement to me that I can't even reconcile that we would have a war over that. I mean, if you want to talk about, World War II or, is war necessary is a whole nother, topic. But at some point, even people that are very, very peaceful people understand that war may be necessary. War may be necessary to stop human atrocities. And this is completely different than starting a war, because you and I have a different view on who is on our spiritual path, or who's leading us on our spiritual path. So I definitely think it's a good thing to consider. Your question is awesome because it brings up this conversation.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, David?
I used to hear the term, and I think we mentioned it on this panel before. I know we have in a lot of conversations where people say, yeah, I'm not, you ask them, well, what's your faith or what religion are you? And they go, I'm not really religious, or they'll say, I'm Catholic by faith. I'm not really religious. I'm spiritual, I didn't know what the hell that meant at first. I was like, what a cop-out. Just say you don't go to church, asshole. Don't try to cast a spell on me or anything. Just say what you're saying. And for me, now, I guess at this point, I guess I understand that a little better, and that, that's the language that they learned, so to speak, right? But they chose to step back from it and learn other ones, make space, as Jay says, for other things, because as we have come to learn when it comes to various religions, as they're set up and as it comes to their dogma, they're very rigid. They don't allow for this, that, whatever it is, homosexuality, other races, as I've come to find out with, some of the religions that I've been exposed to. And they've made a conscious choice to step back from that, not abandoning it, but stepping back from it and saying, okay, I'm not going to be constrained by these bars, by these walls, while I still respect them and understand them. And that may very well be my faith. I'm not going to, browbeat somebody else because of that language, because they speak a different language. So they just take a step back and they just allow for much more to come into their lives, understand, and really I think it gives them the ability, where they didn't have it before, to understand others and to really love other people, in particular themselves. Because, you can pick any religion out there. I was a part of an extremely strict faith as a Jehovah's Witness when I was growing up. That's not an easy lifestyle, and I don't care if you're Muslim, if you're Catholic, if you practice Taoism, Buddhism, whatever it is. There's only so much that's allowed in any one of them. You know what I mean? Like Jay said, I use this term forever. It's a country club. I use that kind of as a blanket statement, but that's the feeling that you get. And we have rules at this country club, and if you don't meet them, then you're out. And I don't think a lot of people like that, so they started stepping away from that and say, but I am spiritual. I do acknowledge my connection to a higher source or a higher love, let's say, and so they make room for that by, kind of ripping that packaging away, or that, that wrapping.
I think that's such a great point, and that's one of the things that frustrates me more than anything about religion is this individuation, this kind of club mentality where we're going to have all these denominations. I believe just a little bit different than you, just a little bit different than you, just a little bit different than you, so we have different groups for that. And I think that's the cop-out, right? It's not that I'm saying, and I understand what you're saying about spirituality versus, oh, I'm spiritual, but I'm not very religious. Well, I can see why people would say that's a cop-out because it means you're some people think that it just means you do whatever you want and you have no real connection and no real belief system, belief structure, and that's not necessarily the case. And one of the things that frustrates me more than anything is this idea that we're better than you, or this book says this, so you're outcast. And it's like I do not remember Jesus Christ saying anything like that. And so for us to box even our greatest spiritual teachers, Buddha, Christ, and you even look at some of the more modern days like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, these guys, it was about love. And so to your point, Amy, about, at the end of the day, do you have to, is there a time where you have to defend yourself for war? Maybe. Probably in the past, but does that mean it has to continue to go on that path? Because I know that Martin Luther King wouldn't have been nearly as successful in his endeavors had he not based his campaign on love and nonviolence as opposed to Christianity. Yes, he was a Christian. Yes, he was a preacher, but he preached from love. He preached from the heart. He preached from the things that Jesus spoke and Buddha spoke, not the things that modern day religions are standing behind their bully pulpits and breeding toxicity within their organizations. I think that's the big problem here, is we're in a situation now where we've allowed religion to become so mixed up in politics and money, and it's almost like where we had to separate church from state. Now we have to separate religion from spirituality, or we get bogged down in a quagmire of mutual discontent because somebody doesn't share the same belief I do. And as long as I need you to believe what I believe in order for my belief to be validated, then I don't really hold that belief very strongly. That's just an opinion, in my opinion.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Come on, Mikey.
I think the biggest thing you bring up there, Mike, is about inclusion versus exclusion. I mean, and if the nature of what spirituality is your ability to connect with your own road so that you feel part of this planet and your space, then the things that say you're not part of this, back to that comment from before, they just serve you. They don't make you better. They don't help you in this quest of identifying what it is that you're here for, what your purpose is. So if we're mostly concerned with the rules of playing instead of going out and living, then how on earth are we supposed to actualize what it is that we're all about? So to me, I think, and that's why I'm back to why they have to be separate words now. I think the intention may have been a good intention, that religion meant to drive spirituality. It was the container that allowed you to go to these bigger places, until it started to realize that the only place it would let you go is the one that it had already drawn out for you. It said, this is your road. Well, now I've got the same problem with it that I have anytime anybody says, here's the one way to live. There isn't one way to live. There's 7 billion ways to live, because there's 7 billion of us. So how can we look at these and say, does it bring me to a better place? Yes, I should do it. Does it not bring me to a better place? And in fact, does it not bring our world to a better place? I guess is the big one that I have from a religion standpoint. Growing up as a Catholic kid, I got married and went to the Episcopal Church and ultimately to a Lutheran church. And when I came out, the Lutheran church kicked me out. Didn't say, how can we help you? It said, look, this is the rules of the game, and if you don't want to play them, we'll have to kick you out. Instead of, how is this helping you on your spiritual journey? And so it was right back to rule book that said, if you're going to play, here's how we play. But the real issue isn't about how I play. The issue is how I discover, how I self-actualize, and how I show up big to what it is that I'm supposed to do. And I don't know that anybody else has my answer. And the big problem, I guess, and then I'll get off my soapbox, is that we look to religions to tell us the answer, when the only thing that they should do, from my perspective, is they should be really good at asking you a whole lot of questions so that you develop your answer. And spirituality, I think, is that questioning process, and religion is the presenter at the front of the room that says, here are the 10 things you must do. And the spiritualist is the person who said, what do you think about this? How could you do this? So maybe spiritualism is really coaching and asking, and religion's all about telling. Here's what you should do, here's how you should live, here's what you should believe. And I just don't see how that advances anybody's ability to be who they really are.
I certainly could not have expected any different answer from the resident greatness coach.
Everything goes to coaching.
But I joke, but I'm serious. I mean, I mean that, you know, this idea that we are not asking great questions of ourselves, and I read a book called Conversations with God years ago by Neil Donald Walsh, amazing book, and that is the crux of that book. The man hit rock bottom. He was at his wit's end, he was homeless, and he was just tired of life beating the crap out of him. So he started to ask questions. He said, God, I want answers, and he started asking questions, not preaching to other people, but asking questions of himself, going within to speak to that source or that part of the creator that's within himself. And so oftentimes religion plays the role of it's like taxation between man and God. You know, you have to, in order to get to God, you have to come through religion and, you know, and tithe to us in order to get, you know, you look back at Martin Luther and what he did and the corruption that he saw in the Catholic Church when it came to indulgences. Rich people were able to do whatever they want, pay for their indulgences, and now they're forgiven by God. Martin Luther was pulling his hair out going, this is absolutely insane. What are we doing as, you know, as a religion that we're allowing this great message of Christ to go by the wayside in order to get our, you know, our everyday fix? And then we have this classist warfare. And I know I'm going outside of the scope a little bit, but I think it speaks to that point. And I saw a great quote the other day that said, religion is somebody else's story and spirituality is yours. And so how do we begin to walk our own stories? Amy, what are your thoughts?
Well, what we're talking about brings back to me some of the ancient wisdom of the leaders like Lao Tzu and Hafez, Rumi, is that this spirituality is the undoing, is the removing, right? It's about removing what has been placed on our being or on our soul or what society places on us. So in the course of this discussion, it occurs to me that spirituality would be the removing of sorts, where religion is kind of layering it on, like you know, paper mache. So religion is really kind of giving us more to put over our being, whereas spirituality may be this kind of peeling away to be in direct contact with the heart. So when the head and the heart are in complete communication and there's no interference, that may be spirituality.
David, you brought up a great point before, and that's a great point, Amy. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to accentuate that point because it's the layering on as opposed to the peeling away. And I think, David, you hit on that before as well about the religion is the kind of the wrapper. It's like this paper mache. You were a Jehovah's Witness. You had this, you know, a lot of dogma surrounding you, and you decided to kind of peel that away in search of your own spirituality. What does that take to do that? How were you able to do that?
Oh man, hit rock bottom is a good start. For me, I mean, my entire social construct was built around the church and the congregation, and like even all my friends, you know, went to the same congregation or were of the same faith. It was frowned upon to hang out with anybody that wasn't. So you end up growing up knowing only this world that you've been surrounded by. So when you hit rock bottom in those in that environment, you lose everything because you don't have your family, your friends anymore. They don't talk to you anymore. This didn't happen to me particularly, but I know a lot of other of my friends that went through the same thing where they happened to be employed by I don't know, let's say an elder in the congregation or something like that had a general contracting company or whatever it was, they'd lose their job. They'd get fired. So they would literally, because they didn't follow this set of rules, would lose their entire world, their livelihood, their family and friends and stuff like that. So when it happened to me, I didn't necessarily attack them because of it or say them wrong. Like, absolutely, hey, I didn't play by your rules. I get it. I'm out. Try it again. I'm not a very good rule player. So it didn't work out. So that's when I just started to, and this was years ago. This was like maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe 7. I kind of blocked most of it out as far as when it took place. But you just have to start from scratch. It's like being born. Oh, wow, I can't believe I actually used that term. It's like being born again.
You know that was going to come up.
Yeah. But you come back. You literally come back into this world again, like an infant, not knowing anything about this world, not knowing anything except for the fact that you have all this love inside, and you can't understand why you're not accepted, or why you're so bad. And so then I started asking questions. Am I bad? Like, I'm a good father. I love my children. I love my neighbors. I love my friends. I don't even hate the people that now turn around if they see me in the grocery store, or if I was a server at a restaurant and they got my table, they'd get up and leave or go to another table, so I didn't even feel animosity toward them. So then I just started, asking questions and started peeling back and again, not attacking my family or, their stand, but just wasn't, I don't fit well in boxes, Mike.
Jay, yes, cheers, very nice. Jay, you had a similar experience. I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but how did you begin to work your way back towards spirituality after having been kind of abandoned by religion?
I think, David brings up a good point. Life sends you situations that are supposed to make you bigger. It's that line, does it make you better or does it make you bitter? And so in that moment, you can then be disappointed with what went on, or you can realize it just gave you some information. And the information it gave you was that for some reason, it gave me, was for some reason, I just don't seem to be developing into my biggest self if I follow what they say. And to me, that moment was so to me, this was the biggest statement about life that said, own your own life. So growing up as the Catholic kid where they did all your thinking for you, they would read, you didn't really have to interpret that. Then I married somebody who was Lutheran where you had to do all your own thinking, which was read your own Bible, which was by itself a shift. And then I came to a place where all I was doing was listening to what everybody else kept saying, instead of realizing that this is just information. And the question that comes from it all the time is, now that you hear this, what do you want to do with it? And it took me, that moment where my family had to go through what it went through, for me to make my own review of what was true and what was not true for me. And that was the big thing. Just before I came out, I went to every clergy I could think of and said, right or wrong, if you're gay. Because if it's wrong, I'm not doing it. Because I grew up as this Catholic kid that was more about being right than happy, so let's go for that one. And when I was quite prepared to be unhappy but right. I was an accountant. It was unhappy but right, was fine. And every one of them said to me, and this is what floored me, and this is what also reminded me that it told me, at least for me, that this search was right for me. And it was okay to reject some of the things that I had been told about, because the answers that I got by asking were very different than what I was told as a kid. Everybody that I went to, and I went to the synagogue, I went to the Episcopal Church, the Unitarian Church, which everything was fine. And I went to the Catholic Church. I went to all of these and said, is it right or wrong? And every one of them, for who I went to, said, what do you think? I'm like, don't do that to me. I want to know, right or wrong. Just tell me if it's right or wrong. I will follow the religion, because I don't want to, as we're told as good Catholic kids, I don't want the HOV lane to hell just because I'm not doing something that I was supposed to do. So every one of them forced the decision back on me. Every one of them. And in that was when I determined that some of the things that I've been told were just not true for me. They weren't true for me. And maybe they're true for somebody else, but the thing that I find most was that it wasn't true because it didn't bring me to a better place. It didn't make me see or accept the fact that I was born awesome. I get that, even if it meant being gay. So I shouldn't hide. And the kinds of things that religions do is they expect you to be perfect in many cases. Otherwise, or they tell you there's something wrong with you. What if instead your spirituality focused more on what was right with you than what was wrong with you? And how could that bring you and bring our world and bring our conversations and bring everything to a higher place? So now I don't have to be in a battle about I'm more right than you. How about if we're each just really focusing on how to be our best, period? And anybody that doesn't support that, I find now, being at this stage in life, I don't support them. It doesn't work for me. I wouldn't follow it. I wouldn't be part of it. I wouldn't go to Mass. I wouldn't go to that because it doesn't help me be the biggest me. If it did, I would be there. But if it doesn't, I can't be there.
Well, I think that's the thing, right? That's the bottom line for people is if you are unhappy, or I know, David, you brought this up the other day where you had somebody tell you, well, you know, you're struggling right now because you're not following your religion or what you were told to be doing. And your perspective was, but you're struggling too, and you're following your religion. Like, how can that be the thing that says whether or not somebody? Okay, go back in the Bible. Job got his ass kicked, right? I mean, again and again and again. But it wasn't that he wasn't following his path. So to say that because somebody's struggling or somebody's homeless or this, and that's what frustrates me about and I respect and love people who go help other people in any way, shape, and form. But you think about a lot of this mission work that's done out there where you go to, my wife had this issue with her grandfather who went to other countries and taught people about the Bible. He was a farmer, and they were broke and homeless and struggling and hungry, and he didn't teach them to farm. He taught them about the Bible. What are we doing, right? What are your thoughts, Amy?
Well, it's interesting, this conversation about, other people being spiritual or having spirituality. In The Divine Law of Compensation by Marianne Williamson, one of the most important lines for me in that book is when she said, we say, well, the 2 billion people who don't have enough, that are living today on less than $1.25 a day, which is a huge issue in our world, it must be something that, they're not doing something right. There's something maybe, what could they be doing more? But the issue is, it actually points to our spirituality. That is her whole point. Like, it's not that these people are not doing what they can. It's just, it's a reflection of our values and our spirituality, the ones who can do for them. Right. So for me, that just made such a big impression on me. It's like when people say, this person is spiritual, this person isn't religious, they're not doing this right, they're not trying. What does it really say? Because I think it points to the values and the spirituality of a society that allows that to happen. I mean, my favorite is no serious spiritual tradition turns its back on the suffering of another. And I don't know, I think that's so inextricably tied to spirituality for me that it's almost like I always am feeling that, I'm feeling that as spirituality.
That's great. It's like this idea that faith without works is dead, right? Isn't that Lutheran kind of principle? Is that without a keen understanding of your own spirituality, of your own who am I, right? So I remember as a 10-year-old looking in the mirror and going, who is that? Like, who am I? Like, I'm looking in my own eyes going, who am I? And I know that's a little weird for a 10-year-old, but that's that was like, I was trying to figure it out. And just because I had all these religions telling me what I'm supposed to be, and all of these people around me telling me what I'm supposed to be, and I don't even get me. So how am I supposed to, if I don't get me, how am I supposed to get other people? How am I supposed to see the suffering of the world and do great works if I don't even get me first? And I think that, we're sitting in a position right now in our society where we've got massive technology, we can reach around the world, yet at the same time we have massive hunger issues, we have more food going to waste than we have money to pay for it. And we're sitting here going, yeah, oh, it's them. They need to work harder. They need to do this. And, I don't like to get into this whole left versus right political debate because that's the problem. It's that we're debating these most basic issues still. How
Right.
could we possibly still be debating whether
Exactly.
or not it's right to make sure everybody on the planet is fed? Like, how is that
Exactly.
still a debate? What do you think, David?
I love food, so I, I don't think that it should be a debate. I feel that it's and Jay kind of pointed this out too. That it is a it's a social construct. It's man-made first of all. None of the great spiritual leaders, including Jesus, he didn't say, "Hey, by the way, guys, I'm here to bring Christianity. My name's Jesus Christ. Go ahead and just put in, Eanity at the end of it, and that got it." He taught the way, right? Just the way to live, right? He didn't come and like spray a synagogue. This is mine now. He just said this is the way, and it's fine to a certain point if it does, serve you as Jay mentioned, to feel a certain connection to a higher source or to God. But all of them should move you to serve. All of them do, And I think that's what we're all saying. And if it isn't doing that, then it's doing nothing but causing division, right? Like, I serve, I help, my fellow man, as long as he's wearing the right badge, or as long as he's got the right card to get in here. Then you're absolutely missing the point. And when we were listening to the evangelist that came to visit those kids yesterday, she took a moment and she said a prayer with all the kids. And as I'm listening to her, and Mike was there and, Chris was there, everything she was saying, with the exception of a few words that might have been different, was no different than a group meditation. Absolutely no different. To help the kids, and all that is centering yourself with intention, right? That's all it is when you meditate, right? You just want to center yourself with this in mind, whatever it is. I don't care if it's has to do with your job or has to do with your family or love or serving others, whatever it is, or just I want to make sure I'm in line. Show me the way. We say that a person in a prayer says the same thing, just no different than a spiritual activist does the same thing. But hey, I need to make sure that this and this are speaking the same language. Otherwise there's going to be a breakdown. So to me, it really, I know it was only yesterday, but it just really helped me put into words. Like it was like having a translator at the time, in my head, like we all wish that we had, or like in Star Trek where they have the little button, as long as their translator's working, they can hear whatever anybody else is saying. And I think that's what spiritualism does, right? I think that's what, when you reach a certain level where you become a spiritual activist, you do get that. And you can now, I understand what you're saying. We're not any different. I get it. I know you said saved. I know you said Jesus. I know you said Trinity. I know you said prayer. I know what you meant by that. And I don't need to argue with you about the words you chose. That's usually the problem when it comes to, even when we are speaking the same language, right? Just with a friend or someone at a gas station, whatever it is, it might have been just a word that they chose that you didn't like, and so you chose to get up in arms about it, totally missing the point of what they were saying. Like, man, why'd you get in the damn way? Like, what he meant was, I almost hit you with my car, dude, and I was upset about it. I'm scared. And I want to know what the hell you were thinking. Do you realize you almost lost your life? But you want to get pissed about the fact that he used the word damn and ignore the fact that you ran a red light, or whatever it is, or you came whipping around the gas station. So I think, and just to touch on it again, Mike, that was how I used to think when they said, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I understand what they mean by that now. But so I think that when someone does become a spiritual activist, that's what it, or just spiritual per se, they just get a magic translator, because now they communicate here perfectly well, and they can understand that that's all that other person is doing as well, to the best of their ability.
Wow, that is such a great point, David. So you're kind of defining the spiritual activist as somebody who's not in a fight with religion, but they're actually people with open arms toward all people, whether they come from this religion, that religion, or the other. And that speaks volumes to the level of understanding of how we move this needle forward, where we start to begin the unification process of people around the world, as opposed to continuing the division, which is causing the breakdown of society, around the world. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Amy?
Hear, hear. This is a great discussion. I mean, so much is coming up, and so many great insights. I think what David's talking about in terms of having that kind of, it's creating that space, but it's also having that tolerance and that compassion just to allow different perspectives into our lives. I know that we've talked about this before, but Martin Luther King talking about that we have no moral influence over people that can feel our underlying contempt. And when I really start to understand that, when there's anything in my voice or my tone that shows the other person that they're not 100% accepted in their ideas, I lose that person, I lose communication with that person. And so I've really been thinking about this and seeing it play out in different, human interactions in my life, and seeing it, with how it plays out on the world stage.
That's really deep.
I see Jay's hands going nuts over there. He must have something.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yes, no, that's a great point, and I'm gonna hit him in just 1 second. I just have to say, it reminded me of an experience I had the other day at work, and I was in a conversation with a gentleman, and we were talking about gun violence. We were talking about school shootings. We were talking about man's inequity towards other man, and he had this really anti-gun, anti-violence approach or perspective. And I was like, yeah, man, I feel where you're coming from. I understand what you're saying. And not 10 minutes later, he's in an argument with the server in the next section to him about some super tiny little stuff, and they just have this little mind battle going on. And I'm going, and I pulled him aside later and I said, you just had a conversation with me about how passionate you are about nonviolence and creating mutual understanding. And here we are, 5 minutes later, and you're in a petty argument with the person standing right next to you. What does that say about how deeply you believe in your convictions? And I'll turn it over to you, Jay.
Wow,
that's a hard one to follow, Mike. But I will try. So in listening to all this thing, I guess, I'm reminded of, so Amy and I recorded last night or the night before. Amy was on the Greatness On podcast. And the theme that we had there was, we build our understanding of the world based on the wisdom of people who came before us. That there is brilliance out there. And it's our responsibility to pull the pieces together and be wiser and smarter and more connected and more aware of ourselves than maybe the generation before us was, because their wisdom creates our wisdom. And one of the things that made me think in this the course of today's conversation is something that we were talking about, and we just happen to call it the rhodium rule. And the rhodium rule, rhodium being the most precious metal. And it just struck me today as I was listening to this that there's 3 parts to it, and I think maybe it's part of the discussion or the definition of spirituality. Spirituality is all about figuring yourself out and being that self, and then letting other people be themselves, right? Isn't that kind of what it is? That we have to self-actualize, show up the biggest way that we can, and be not tolerant so much as accepting that somebody else's road to greatness is not ours and doesn't have to look like ours. And so to me, the pieces of the rhodium rule that we use in understanding how to be consciously present in life, what if that's just another way of saying be spiritual? Know yourself, figure out what it is that you got, be yourself, look at your world and figure out how it shows up. And then the third part, which I think is what takes it out of the self and brings it to the world, help everybody else be themselves. If I did that instead of telling you who you're supposed to be, instead, how can I help you realize what it is that, or who you are, and how you should show up here? Couldn't I then allow you to have your own religion, if you want to use that word, or your own spirituality, your own journey? How do I help you on your journey? And I can only do that if the me that shows up to it is somebody who's highly conscious enough to see that there's more than me on this planet. And, you know, it just makes me think, Mike, just what you were talking about, that people argue with other people because they think their perspective is the perspective. What if the perspective is you get to have one and I get to have one, and how do I appreciate the fact that you have one, even if it's different than mine? So how do I help you be who you are, even if my understanding of who we're supposed to be is different?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then what do? I allow you the spiritual journey to figure yourself up and show up in your biggest, most creative, and best self, rather than say, you're only great if you play by my rules.
Wow, Jay, that was well said and a great way to wrap up this conversation. As I could go on all day, but I won't do it to you. I know we're all very busy, but I am honored, humbled, and blown away, honestly, about this panel and the perspectives that you guys are bringing to the table, because it is truly these types of conversations that are going to get us over the hump to begin to start to self-actualize, to show up to greatness, to show up to life in a big way, and to accept others along the way and be that loving, open human being that is this spiritual being having that experience. Amy, tell us where our listeners can find you. Obviously, they can find you here on The Spiritual Activist. Where else can they find you?
I'm at recyclinghappiness.com, and you can join the conversation at Recycling Happiness on the Facebook page.
Outstanding. David, can you share with us how our listener can find you in addition to being on The Spiritual Activist?
Yeah, kickassdad.org or directly at david@kickassdad.org.
You got it. Jay, I'm going to throw the last one to you, my greatness mentor. Where can we find you, brother?
You can always reach me at thegreatnesszone.com. You can find The Greatness Zone at Facebook too, Facebook The Greatness Zone. And we're celebrating the fact that Greatness Zone is now a podcast. So go to iTunes, find us there. Yeah, we've got 7 episodes done and more coming. So thank you, Mike.
Yes, absolutely. So go to iTunes, check out Jay's podcast. Just simply search The Greatness Zone, and you can find his conversation there. And I look forward to circling it back around with you guys again next week.
Much love.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Namaste.
Bye.